whoever doesn't know me, which is a lot of you, my name is Ryan Newfield. A year ago, my family and I moved from America. I've been living in America for half my life, back to South Africa. And we found this little heaven called Muizenberg, which was looking for a rabbi. And thus I find myself there. I will tell you, whoever is overseas, it is still a little piece of heaven on earth. The mountain is still there. I know, because I climbed it last week. And the ocean is there, I know, because I surfed yesterday. Okay, so I can verify a few facts that a lot of you will remember. Other than that, I don't want to do a lot of talking because I just wanted to connect a lot of people who hadn't seen each other for a long time, as well as learn a lot about Muizenberg. I think the expression that James Baldwin or one of these famous authors said is, know from whence I come. Because if you know from where you come from, you know, your future has no limits. And I didn't grow up in Muizenberg. Unfortunately, I would have loved to. I grew up in Johannesburg. But for those who did grow up in Muizenberg, please feel free now to reminisce, get into a space of thinking about your upbringing or what you know about Muizenberg. We've got some speakers that have something to say, and I'm sure each of you will relate in your own way. So I'm going to go and ask Leonard to open up for us. Leonard, I'm going to make you the spotlight for everybody. And again, you know, try keep it to between 10 and 12, 13 minutes. If this does get, Leonard, make spotlight. Okay, Leonard, it's all you now.
Mute myself. I'm unmuted. And I'm going to put up this.
We can see it now.
You can see it?
Yep.
Okay. Right. If you dig below the surface, Muizenberg is paved with stories, some of them famous, some of them forgotten, but a lot of them are unique. Now, where else in Southern Africa would you find the oldest colonial building after Cape Town's castle? That's in Muizenberg. And where would you find a lavish Venetian palazzo that was built by Mussolini's fascist ambassador to South Africa? That's in Muizenberg. And this corner of False Bay is witness to conflict and cannon fire. Here in 1795, British military muscle wrests control of the Cape from the Dutch. And because Muizenberg is always air-conditioned in summer by the southeaster, which locals used to know as the Luft, this is where that scoundrel... Sorry, somebody's talking?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, fine. And this is where that scoundrel, Cecil John Rhodes, and other ruthless mining plutocrats from the Transvaal built their opulent seafront mansions. Now, shortly before, the new suburban railway line to Simonstown overwhelms them all with an avalanche of immigrant Litvak Jews. Now, this new suburban line has two railway stations, both ambiguously named. This is False Bay, which is the stop for Muizenberg, and this is Muizenberg, which is the stop for False Bay. And it's into the schizoid situation that I entered the world in Cromer Road, Muizenberg in 1939, just 86 days before Hitler invades Poland. And the reason I'm born in Cromer Road has a story all its own, and it involves my auntie Lily, who's my mother's younger identical twin sister. Now, my mother's parents, the Grunitskys, emigrate from Tsarist Russia first to London's East End, and then, with the promise of a more prosperous future, the Cape Colony at the bottom of Africa. The twins, and you see them at the bottom of the picture, Fanny, who's my mother, and Lily, are the youngest of the sprawling Victorian family. The surname has now been shortened to Gron. They're born in Cape Town on the 13th of August, 1898, and inseparable ever after. Both girls display talents and artistic tendencies. In more enlightened times, my mother would have become a stage actress and Lily would have become a graphic designer. But in the early years of the 20th century, neither role is considered suitable for a nice Jewish girl from an observant family. Now, we ripple dissolve forward, as they say in movie scripts, and Auntie Lily meets Harry Trappler, a dapper young English Jewish ex-serviceman who settles in Cape Town after surviving the ghastly trenches of the First World War. They fall in love and marry. Earlier, when he was still in Britain, Harry suffers a condition diagnosed as hysterical blindness, which is at the time, doctors blame on his military service, but the medics are wrong. Hysterical blindness is an early manifestation of multiple sclerosis, an incurable nervous disease which strikes him down on their honeymoon. Harry travels to Europe to seek a cure or at least a treatment, but instead he's coldly informed that he will only survive for 9 more years. He offers to divorce Lily so that she might find a more promising life, but encounters that curious combination of obstinacy and sympathy that runs in my mother's family. Lily refuses and devotes her life to care for Harry. Now, in post-Great War London, Harry experiences the retail world, working in a hardware store in Islington, and so together, in the early 1930s, they open a store in central Muizenberg selling hardware and groceries, and the store promises service well before the era of self-service supermarkets and frozen foods. It's called Trapplers and describes itself as high-class grocers, straddling the corner of Church and Palmer Roads. Unlike today with its unsavory subway, Church Road is a busy thoroughfare with an unmanned level crossing over the railway line. Harry and Lily, who now have a daughter, Tressa, live at a house called Airwood on the corner of Killarney and Church Roads. And every day except Sunday, Harry, unable to walk without crutches, is wheeled across the street to take charge of the store. Trapplers is surrounded by other bustling food shops. Princess Dairy run by the Helligs, Schneider's Fish Shop, Levenstein's Kosher Poultry Shop, and a couple of kosher butchers with sawdust on the floor. Soon, Trapplers becomes the grocery store of choice for Muizenberg's vibrant Jewish community. Around about 1950, the Padovitzes opened a fish and chip shop further down Palmer Road. And boy, that was wonderful before Cheder. At the time, my parents, Fanny and Johnny Weinreich, I don't know where that came from, are living in Arrangezucht, intending to buy a house in Newland's leafy Herschel Walk. But Lily and Harry are now anchored in Muizenberg, to all intents immobilized, and so family plans are turned upside down. Because my mother doesn't want to be more than 10 minutes walk from her twin sister. And that's why in the mid-1930s, my parents and sisters move house to Cromer Road in Muizenberg. My mother is able to visit Lily for a couple of hours, then return home and have an hour-long conversation on the phone, inseparable. And that's why my late sister, Rena, and I were born in Muizenberg. In the meantime, my parents, oh, something's gone wrong here, not to worry. Let's see, previous. Right. In the meantime, my parents build a new house at the top road and we move in during 1941. As a toddler, I seem to spend more time than my aunt than at home. And when I'm eventually allowed to stroll around Muizenberg on my own, I'm duty-bound to walk anywhere in the village without dropping in on Trapplers. I have to drop in, I'm sorry, to greet my aunt and uncle and usually rewarded with a sweet. So stepping into Trapplers anytime during the late 40s and early 50s, one would be enveloped by the nostril-twitching tang of Baltic herons, packed in barrels with coarse salt, pickled cucumbers, fresh bread, immense wedges of mousetrap cheddar, and rounds of sweet milk cheese. The glass-fronted main counter is packed with butter, cream cheese, cold meats, and is almost obscured by large tins full of biscuit packages from Pyatt's and Bowman's bakeries. On the right, an enormous glass-fronted display cabinet with small compartments full of loose, old-fashioned confectionery, like, oh, sorry, there we go. Sorry, I have lost this. You seem to be. Anyway, there we go. You saw the Humphrey's Sunrise toffees, bullseyes, licorice, all sorts, wine gums and caramels. And on the left, shelves of household items as varied as brooms, cloths, stoop polish and string. By the way, that's my parents in 1934. That's me, aged, I don't know, 2 or 3, with my aunt Lily on the left and my mother, a twin sister, on the right. And if you looked around the shop, which was airy and the mood is light-hearted and welcoming and chatty and industrious, you see Lawrence, the debonair Cape-coloured delivery attendant loading his enormous basket that fits over the small front wheel of his bike with grocery orders, preparing for his rounds to charm the hearts of every kitchen maid across the suburb. Uncle Harry sits behind a desk, manfully wrestling with admin or placing orders with wholesalers on the phone. And carefully monitoring all activity in the store, Aunt Lily stands at her table, manipulating cardboard and sellotape, wielding a large pair of scissors, expertly assembling food parcels for her customers, relatives, and friends back in ration-strapped Britain. And what does the parcel contain? Well, it contains peak-free biscuits and slabs of Cadbury's dairy milk and Sharp's toffees and Earl Grey tea and Cross and Blackwell cans, Frey Bentos corned beef, Tate and Lyle sugar cubes and golden syrup, and that pink staple of English high teas, tinned salmon. And they're all exported from Britain in search of foreign currency. And she's packing it all along with South African dried fruit to send it back to those who would enjoy them most. Recipients in the British Isle, fortunate enough to have relatives in Muizenberg, had a lot of reason to be grateful to Lily Trappler. Now, Lily rates a mention in Hetty Davis's book about Muizenberg, though sadly inaccurate, possibly quoting from Benjamin Bennett's Jewish Times obituary of Uncle Harry. It says she was so saintly she didn't have a maid. But both Hetty and Bennett are misinformed because I well remember her indispensable maid, also named Lily. I also checked this with my 91-year-old cousin Tressa, their daughter, now living in Shropshire, England, and she reminded me too of Penguin, the beloved black and white Manx cat, which once fell into a tin of red paint. The book also omits my aunt's artistic and design talents, which were put to incredible commercial and social purpose. When mothers complain that their children pull up their noses at boiled eggs, Lily solves the problem by drawing cartoon faces in Indian ink on the shells. And at home, she's always composing exceptional posters with immaculate lettering for every fundraising charity event, Jewish and Gentile. And in the 1970s, on a visit to South Africa, we noticed that Trappler's is now a poodle parlor. And today, according to Google Maps, it seems to be a pet supply shop under a sign reading Muizenberg Village Center. But back to Lily. Dedicating her life to care for a disabled husband, and was never easy, she proves the medical experts wrong. Harry outsurvives the pessimistic 9-year life forecast by nearly half a century, and he dies a month before his 77th birthday. Their marriage lasts 42 years. His obituaries fill the Cape newspapers and Jewish press. Harry used to say wistfully to Lily, "Look what I've done to your life." And she would reply, "You've given me what few women have had, a challenge to meet." Thank you.
Wow, so Leonard, thank you so much. I know exactly where that last picture that you showed, the pet parlor. So just to give you an idea of how Muizenberg has changed, next door to that is a Rastafarian music and coffee shop, which is selling, all different types of Rastafarian, different items. And then next to it is a vegetarian restaurant. So that's what's there today. Muizenberg, they call that the village of Muizenberg today.
Right.
One thing I'm very jealous of is you had like a big bakery right there in Muizenberg, which sounded amazing on Palmer Road. And whoever relates to Leonard in some way, there's a way that you can actually put in the chat. You can write something to the chat, either to Leonard or, remembering whatever it is. So please feel free to do that. Thank you, Leonard, for that presentation. And I love seeing the pictures as well. I think we're going to go now to Colin. Colin, are you there? I'm going to make you the main participant. Colin.
Yep, I'm here. You got me.
You? Okay. I'm just going to make
me. The most unbelievable evening. We raised an incredible amount of money. It was put to a good cause. Now, the causes, some of the things that we did, we had a holiday once a year for 2 weeks. We had the kids from Epping Garden Village, girls and boys. For 2 weeks, we entertained them, we fed them, we took them out on buses, we did whatever. These little kids would go nowhere. They come from broken homes. We looked after them. I mean, I can picture Mervyn Gold standing on the counter, still stirring the pot of soup. We bride for them. The late Bernard Ziff bride regularly for people. He loved it. And you can imagine a bunch of youngsters. I mean, we were 18, 19, looking after 13-year-olds. But we managed, and we did a great job. Auntie Dora also, that's the one thing she actually paid towards. But she gave us this home that we looked after. We ended up using for meetings. And it was absolutely incredible, the joy that one gets out of serving people like that, the kids like that. And I'm sure it stuck with them for the rest of their life. They were looked after a bunch of, we were youngsters. We also had Edith Adams' home, Adams Farm Home, which was for the Rhodesian kids who lost parents in the war there. Came to Simonstown. We used to go there, look after them, take them to movies, bus rides, whatever. Plus Jagersburg in Westlake for mentally challenged colored kids. We looked after them. They would come, they would clamber on top of you. They wouldn't let you go. But that was what we did, and immense pleasure out of it. And then we also looked after the old age home in Grassy Park. It was unknown, it was unthought of that we would go to areas like that, but we did, and it was before its time. And we looked after the old people there. We used to sing for them, have Christmas parties for them.
Anybody else want to speak?
Was Community Chest have the annual carnival at Maynard Hall, and the good old Leo's always ran schools, and we did damn well. We worked damn hard, and we raised a lot of money for Community Chest. Eventually, I joined the committee. The late Michael Garvey said, "Here comes Mr. Shapiro's little son." I was never little, but he used to call me Mr. Shapiro's little son. I was a youngster on the committee, and eventually I took over running the Old Mutual Arena, and from there went, and after we finished in Muizenberg, sorry, I mustn't forget, part and parcel with St. Giles, the late Teddy Reese used to be at St. Giles. And I remember I used to go drive every Tuesday or Wednesday, we didn't turn. We'd go drive combis for them, go fetch them at home. So right. Go fetch them at home, take them to St. Giles. They could play table tennis, have movies, whatever else, and then drive them back at night. That was part and parcel of the work we did as service. And in my later years at Leo's, I used to go, Peninsula School feeding, and everybody remembers doggy bags. Nowadays, you go to a restaurant, you ask for a doggy bag, and all that happens, they give you a bag, you put your takeaways, and off you go. In those days, you used to get a proper bag, school feeding bag, pay R1 or R2 for the bag. We raised a lot of money for the kids for Peninsula School feeding. That's not done anymore. It's a great shame, because people would gladly pay towards excess food that they have over. So my story, that's about Beitar and Leo's. And being in Muizenberg, there are a few things that Rabbi Ryan didn't know about. First of all, the shul, Muizenberg shul must have been the only shul in the world that had rock concerts or socials in those days in the Herzl Hall for 400, 500, 600 youngsters. The boys were on the one side, the girls were on the other. You had Omega Limited or Glass Onion playing, Macaulay's Workshop, whatever. We had great bands playing, and the shul raised money from socials that came from Sea Point, everywhere else, to come enjoy the evening. And then just the last thing quickly, Muizenberg, rugby at Muizenberg, the old boys, the Spurs at school. And I was talking before, I see that Barry's on, and I'll never forget his dad running onto the field. And the late Lionel Scher and Cedric Kushner did a great job. And we had lots of very, very enjoyable Sundays. So Muizenberg to me is something never will be forgotten. And thanks, Rabbi R. Appreciate it, and thank everybody for listening. I hope I didn't bore anybody. So, cheers, guys.
No, very, very interesting, Colin, to hear Grassy Park, etc. I've never been brave enough to go in there, to be honest. I wonder what lurks there today. But I can see that you went all over the place, Vereniging, etc. And I'm sure there were people who remember that. If anyone was in Beitar or the Lions and remember that, please write to Colin privately, or you can put it in the chat to everybody. Lastly, we're going to go to Henry, not in any particular order. I will say that if by any chance it gets cut off in 7 minutes time, I'm going to immediately restart the talk. So please rejoin if you want to hear the end of what Henry has to say. I'm hoping that it won't shut down, but Zoom's a little bit temperamental. So if it does cut, please everyone join again. Henry, without further ado, thank you all the way from London for agreeing, as well as Leonard and Colin. We've had over 70 people here. I had many people asking for the recording, so that just shows how much love came from Muizenberg. Henry, all yours.
Thank you very much. Yes, not London anymore, but south coast of England in Whitstable.
Oh, even better.
I want to say thank you, Rabbi Ryan, for organizing this and for inviting me to speak about Muizenberg. That's where I grew up, and that holds a very special place in my memory and in my heart. A part of me still belongs to Muizenberg. Anyway, when I was asked to suggest a topic for my talk, I thought about a few things: the school, the shul, all sorts of things, cheder. But one thing that jumped up at me was 2MJ. 2MJ, which is, of course, 2nd Muizenberg Jewish Scout Troop, played a very big part in my life when I was a young teenager. For those who may not know, and just to recap, there were 2 scout troops in Muizenberg. The 1st Muizenberg were Sea Scouts, and there were no Jewish people in that troop. The 2nd Muizenberg was a Jewish troop, which was actually specifically designated as Jewish. And I understand that there were only 2 troops in the whole of the country, the whole of South Africa, that were specifically designated as Jewish, and Muizenberg was one of them. I didn't know about the history of 2MJ when I originally lived there and initially joined as a Cub Scout in the 1940s. Actually, I didn't bother to find out until recently. I looked up something called Scout Wiki, which is a kind of a Scout Wikipedia. And I learned that 1st Muizenberg was set up in 1909 and 2nd Muizenberg was set up in 1927, apparently by a man called Marcus Haft. Although Wiki Scout went on to say that the group will, however, be remembered by the leadership of Bertie Stern, better known as Sandpiper. And of course, that's absolutely right. Bertie Stern was a key figure when I remember in Muizenberg scouting, and he was also known for lots of other activities. He set up the Mosque Theatre in False Bay, near False Bay Station, just nearby where I lived for a time. I also learned recently that, and this may tie in with the Beitar Bonim thing, that it was largely through Bertie Stern that Habonim didn't get a foothold in the Jewish community in Muizenberg, because I read this, and Leonard mentioned the book, this one, Muizenberg, The Shtetl by the Sea, written by Hetty Davis, and she mentions that how it came about that Habonim weren't introduced at the time. I'm going to read this. It says here, this appears to have been written in the 1930s, when it says, a short while later, Bertie Stern was asked by Habonim to join the Western Province leadership. And in consultation with the leaders of the Boy Scouts, it was agreed that he could fulfill this role, provided that no Habonim group was established in Muizenberg. Thus it came about that in arguably the most fervently Zionistic suburb of Cape Town, Habonim would not exist for several decades. My earliest memory of being a cub was chanting, and I remember the chant, Arkela, we'll do our best, we'll dib, 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 we'll dob, 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 woof. At least that's how I remember it. What I didn't know then, and I've actually only just discovered, was that I looked it up when I was preparing this talk, was that DIB is actually spelled D-Y-B, and it's an acronym for do your best. And DOB was we'll do our best. So DIB, DIB, DIB actually had a meaning which I've only just discovered, over 70 years later. Anyway, I must have been about 10 or 11 when I moved up to the scout troop, became a member of the Cobra Patrol. Our 2MJ had three patrols, Cobras, Springboks, and Wood Pigeons. And each was led by a patrol leader, and then there's a hierarchy of seconds, thirds, fourths. We met, and Colin mentioned Sunflay. Well, of course, we met in the boathouse on the side of, over the fire and evening campfires with gusty singing. It was great. Troop leaders at the time when I belonged to 2MJ were, among others I remember, were I think Wolfie Udelman, was called Squirty Udelman. There was Alan Michalowski and Raymond Frankel, and I, and one of the camp leaders and scout leaders was also Jack Aaron, who I think is with us from Canada at the moment on this talk today. All of Bertie Stern's children were involved. I didn't know the eldest Robbie, but Max was certainly heavily involved. I think he was my patrol leader one time. And of course, his twins, Richard and Peter, were very involved. I want to mention one thing that was of particular importance, and that was called the Gordon Shield, which was an inter-troop competition for troops in the Western Cape, where we had a weekend of scouting tests and evening campfire plays that formed part of the competition. 2MJ actually had a golden period of winning the Gordon Shield, I think 4 times in a row, and that was in the 1940s. And when I was involved, we hadn't won for 10 years. And in 1954, I was in the team. I was the patrol leader, and there were 8 of us in the team. Leonard Weinrach, who's just spoken earlier, he was, of course, he was a member of the team. We were extensively coached, but there was very little hope that we would be able to achieve anything. I want to mention also that I don't know what it was about us, but we were not very interested in badges. Scouting movement, of course, has all sorts of badges. We used to get 2nd class, 1st class, Bushman's Thong, and Queen Scout. But our troop were not interested in badges. And so I just remember that in 1954, when we went in for this Gordon Shield competition, we did jolly well, but we weren't sure how we were going to manage. But one thing we did really well was our campfire competition. It was every troop put on a little play. Mostly they put on little skits of no consequence. Muizenberg, Jewish troop, put on a grand show called Smoke Aroma, which was based on Oklahoma, and we did a show. I remember. I'm just going to try and remember the word. They struggled to teach me my part, which was we rub and scrub and brush and comb our face and teeth and hair, and all get ready and off we go for breakfast to prepare. It turned out that we were certainly the best player of the evening, but we were absolutely over the moon because we became the joint winners of the Gordon Shield jointly with 4th Rondebosch. We spun a coin, we brought the trophy home, and we brought the Gordon Shield home for the first time in a decade. As I remember, when we walked back to the station from the site where we had the competition, people called out to us, okay, you can put your badges back on now, because we had no badges, unlike all the others, but we didn't have any. Anyway, that was, I think, the troops' last moment of glory, because in the following years, I understand that interest in the troop waned. Other Jewish groups started up, including Beitar. So eventually, apparently, 2MJ petered out. I want to say that 4 of us, at least, who were in that winning Shield, Gordon Shield team, we are still close friends. We all living in the UK. There's Leonard Weinreich, there's Frank Lazarus, Roger Tabakan, and myself. We still meet up every New Year's Eve. Now, what's it, 60, 70 years, 65, 70 years later, we still meet up for New Year's Eve together with our partners. We didn't the last time because of COVID. So I just want to round off by saying that for over 30 years, 2MJ was something really very special for the Jewish boys of Muizenberg. For many of them, I'm thrilled to be able to bring it back into focus, at least just for a few minutes. So I want to say thank you again to Rabbi Ryan. Thank you.
Sure. So Henry, I'll start off with you. I'll tell you how we're going to end this. This is the way that I'm imagining now.
Yeah.
If there are any closing thoughts that either Colin has after hearing the other 2 speakers, or Leonard, or you, Henry, if you want to comment about anything that they said, I'll give you each 2 minutes. And then maybe we'll go, if anyone else wants to say anything in particular, I'll open it up to the audience. If anyone wants to speak, you just have to unmute yourselves. And then after that, I know that from the previous chat, it's not in this chat, but from before we got cut off, someone wrote, Henry, that you were the head boy of Muizenberg School. Someone wrote, some people were writing about Colin as well, and other people were writing about Trapplers. So I hope you saw those comments. I don't know how good you are with technology, but I was monitoring people's comments. So maybe we'll ask you, Henry, to lead us in that Muizenberg song. But before we do that, Leonard, I'll go to you. Leonard, do you have any closing comments based on anything that you want to say or heard from the other speakers, etc.?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for putting the whole thing together. It's a brave act, and it's brilliantly done. Sorry that I messed up my slides, but I'd only put them together about 2 minutes before we went on air. What can I say? Not very much, except inviting everybody to sing the school song is a very dangerous thing, because the lyrics kept changing. So for every generation, there's a different set of lyrics. Ours were written by a man called W.A. Andrews, who I think went shout up, shout from Muizenberg, the school beside, hooray, it's full of hoorays and it's a jolly good school. And then along came Wally Gordon, who decided it had to be a little bit smarter than that. So he changed all the lyrics. So, but that's after my time.
So no problem. We'll do your version first, and then we'll
don't. I can't sing anymore. I might have sung in the choir once, but I'm certainly not going to sing now.
Okay, no problem. Thank you, Leonard, once again. And even though the slides weren't all in order, etc., we definitely got the point. And I loved especially seeing the Trappler's store. Seeing what was there. I know exactly what's there now. So I particularly love seeing your own store. So thank you for that. So Colin, any last thoughts?
Just a quick one. I forgot to mention my sister Cheryl, who's still there and was in Beitar and Leo's and everything else. And she's got photographs. I put up nothing. But she said, I've asked her to send them to me, and I'll send them to you, Ryan. For next time, you can put up a few pics of the Leo's and Beitar, whatever she can find, and we can, bring back some memories of those days, what happened. But I know Wally Gordon's version, and Angela knows it, and Alison knows it, and not Blumenthal and Mervyn. We all know, I think, the same song on the hill. So it'd be good to hear the choir. It'll be a bit of a catch up.
So we'll end off with that. Okay, let's go to Henry, and then we'll go to that song. Henry, any closing thoughts?
Nothing much. I just wanted to just mention one other thing, talking about the Zionist element, was of course what I've also should have in with Bagoz. We were, a number of us were members of something called Bagoz, which was the Boys and Girls Own Zionist Society. And now, I would like to say something. Just say it.
Okay, Lolita, I hear you. I'm going to let you go in a second.
No,
press.
They've pressed it about.
Okay, so I think Lolita, Aaron,
Lolita.
did you want to say something? So just unmute yourself. There we go,
Hi.
Lolita.
Hi, everybody. That wasn't me talking, by the way. I just put my little hand up. I have wonderful memories of Lily Trappler and her family, and being welcomed and being so impressed with the grace with which she used to entertain us. She used to make tea, and to this day, I make tea exactly like Lily does. And I also remember her packing those boxes that she would send abroad. I remember the care with which she did it. And it's in my consciousness, because whenever I do anything, she is somewhere in my heart and my mind. And I loved Leonard's presentation. It was just so heartwarming. And Henry was my head boy. And I was a little bit in love with him. Did you know that, Henry?
Me too with you.
I know. But we'll keep it a secret, shall we?
Don't tell anyone. Don't tell Jack.
No.
And Henry, I used to and teach you the difference between a reef knot and a sheep shank.
And a thief knot. The difference between a reef knot and a thief knot. You remember it was the other way around. You did.
Okay, well, thank you. And, you know, the man next to you, I don't know who that is, but thank you very much. I'm not going to get into, you know, old boyfriend, girlfriend, love stories here, but that was great to hear. I'm just being, you know, comical. That was great. Anyone else wants to say something? I think Philip wants to say something.
Whoever wants to talk.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so Philip put up his hand, and then whoever was talking can go after Philip. Go for it, Philip.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks very much for the opportunity to meet old people from Muizenberg. I lived in Cape Town. Presently, I'm in New York, and I've been in New York for over 60 years. But as you can see from my background, Muizenberg hasn't been too far from my mind and my heart, which we used to love going there from Cape Town to Muizenberg every Sunday, meeting all the Jewish boys and girls from all over and swimming in Muizenberg. I just want to comment on what Henry said about Sandpiper, who was Bertie Stern, who correctly started out in scouting in Muizenberg and then ultimately became the head of Habonim, Western Province, and brought to Habonim, which was a Zionist socialist movement, brought to them all the scouting ability of Baden-Powell, etc. I knew Bertie extremely well. He was Rosh HaMachaneh, and subsequently I became Rosh HaMachaneh. Somebody on the chat here today reminded me, Rosh HaMachaneh probably in the 1940s at Series with Bertie Stern. So I just wanted to comment on the connection that Henry had with Bertie Stern and my connection, which was at the other end in the Jewish Scout movement of Habonim. Thank you very much for the opportunity to make these comments.
Yeah, thank you, Derek. Derek Berghaus. I'm going to put that on you. Derek, go for it.
So nice to see you guys, the people that I know, Colin, Ilana, Marilyn. If my dad was here, he would have loved this new meeting. Barry Blumenthal, I'm sure you remember my father, Jack, and you guys, Colin, and everybody as well. I just have to say, Muizenberg's still in my thoughts. I still think about it, and what's made me even think more is there's a woman named Angela Gorman that's heading up the restoration of the huts on the beach. I don't know if you guys have heard of her. She's doing, I talked to her a few weeks ago. I put in touch with a few people that might be able to help her. I still have a few people back in South Africa. I'm actually in San Diego, living here for the last 40 years. So, but good to see you guys. I'm sorry I woke up a little late and I missed most of the meeting. But if anybody remembers, I actually was texting with David Cave this morning because I'm on my way to London in a couple of months once everything starts to open. And he lives out there, and I saw him last time he was there. Good to see a lot of you I don't remember. I'm sure maybe you would remember the Berghaus family, or my parents, Jack and Esme. But I just wanted to put my 2 cents in. So this is a great meeting, and Muizenberg is always in my heart. One of the
Thank you,
best
Derek.
places.
Thank you from San Diego. It must be very early for you. So thank you. Richard and Doris Stern, can you just unmute yourselves? There we go.
Well, as you probably know from my name, I'm the third child of Bertie and Tilly Stern. I'm really very touched by the fact that many of you remember him. The interesting thing about my father was that in our household, none of us belonged to Habonim for a number of reasons, but we never heard my father talking about Habonim. We were very much involved in the scouting movement, and of course the Breder Fear and the camps, it's all part of our, and you know, after boys eat apricots and do get fat, after supper they run to the lat. Some of you might remember that little song. But I'm in Canada, I've been here since 1959, and going on 85 years old. So some of you were after me and some of you were at the same time. The boathouse, but the war years were the difficult ones for us, with my father up north, and fortunately he returned healthy, although he did have a back operation. But Leonard, I missed your speech, your thing, but I'm not sure that we can, I think it's recording. If there's any way that we can get the recording, that would be fine. I have many memories which I won't bore you with. Just to let you know that both Robert and Maxwell Stern both died from cancer, one after another. So that was a very sad time for my mother and my father. Just one last thought. The Mask Theatre, believe it or not, is still going strong. We are having, I have personally stepped in to try and support them financially to keep going till after COVID. But if any of you are interested in donating to the Mask Theatre, that would be really welcome. Perhaps you'd send me an email and I'll send you the link. I don't have it right in front of me. So my email is richardstern@bell.net. And with that, I'll leave this Skype.
Thank you, Richard from Toronto, very much. Mervyn Rosenberg.
Yes. When I was in Sub A, Henry was head boy. I'm very emotional about all of this, but
take your time. Everyone's here. Don't worry. Take your time.
Was those, according to Frida, Harold's mother, Frida Shapiro, through my family, I'm a third generation Muizenberger, but I have 2 sets of great grandparents buried in South Africa, which is unusual for a Jewish boy. And to see all of you people here and the people that I know, it only brings tears to my eyes. And I'm very emotional about all of this living in Muizenberg. I'm still, as I said earlier, a member of Muizenberg Shul. And for me, the greatest pleasure is to go to Muizenberg Shul on Yom Kippur and sit in my late father's chair.
Sing the song, sing the song.
Mervyn can sing the school song, you know. He knows all the words. He sang it with me. And I was told by, I think, Hilton Ross never to sing again in public. But anyway, we both know the words. Hey, Mervyn.
So on that
We
note,
are a very
happy,
anyone
and
else?
that's how it should be.
We're
all of us from Muizenberg, the school beside the sea.
beside the sea. We have the sand, we have the berg, the surf and the sand. It's nature's been so bountiful. We are a fearless land. Go shot up shot from Muizenberg, school beside the sea. David, you there? Say something, David.
And when we almost leave it, it will go on our
When
way.
it's time to leave it,
Baby,
as we venture on our way, we'll honor it by burden deed. Our school hip, hip, hooray!
we have
Mazel
the
tov,
we
mazel
have
tov.
I just want to say that growing up in Muizenberg when I was there were 600 Jewish families, and it was quite unbelievable.
Absolutely.
It was. We had our principal at Muizenberg High School was Jewish. Our maths teacher was Jewish. We had Mrs. Bernstein as well. We had 3 or 4 Jewish teachers in high school. It was unbelievable.
Mervyn, I heard that even the rabbi was Jewish. I'm just playing.
The rabbi used to come to Muizenberg school every Friday. We had religious instruction. I think it was one of the few schools in South Africa that had, besides Herzliya, of course, in the Jewish day schools, that had a Jewish rabbi coming to give religious instruction. But I am so, I can't tell you how I feel. David Lazarus will tell you. Barry Blumenthal will tell you. I mean, we lived.
Well, sorry, I just want to say, Mervyn, thank you for being honest, and you made everyone else emotional as well. So I don't know if that was your intention, but that's what happened. And I think we're going to close. I think we're going to close it now because it's now 1 o'clock in the morning in Australia, and we've got some people from Australia, and we've got some people from San Diego. So we've got the whole time zone of the whole world pretty much sorted here. Thank you all for being here. In particular, the speakers. I will share the video on Facebook and on the email and on the WhatsApp. If anyone is not on there, please ask other people, and you'll find out how to reach that recording. And lastly, it's not the end of the reminiscing, because next week 3 more speakers are going to be speaking about different stories, and this is going to go for 5 weeks. So hopefully that's enough time to reminisce. And just lovely to see faces that I don't know and hear about the place that I'm living in and how it used to be. I'm a little bit jealous. I would have loved to have lived in the Muizenberg that most of you had lived in. But at the same time, to tell you, it isn't a new South Africa. It's got a new face, a new fragrance, and it is still delicious. So if anyone ever wants to visit post-COVID, please feel free. we'll, love to meet, etc., etc. Okay, great. Thank you, everybody, for being here. I'm going to now end the call and see you next week. Thank you so much, everybody, in particular this week. Thank you. Sure.
Cheers, everybody. Nice seeing everybody. Ciao.
Thank you, Rabbi Ryan.
Thank you, everybody. Cheers, Mervyn.
And
Thank you,
Colin
Mervyn.
and Henry.
Alison,
Mervyn.
everybody. Derek.
Wonderful.
Mark.
Thank you.
All the best. See you all go one day. Please God.
Nice to see you.
Thank you, Henry. Lovely. Nice meeting you.
Barry, sorry.
Bye.
All the best to everybody.
Mervyn's
Nice to
my
see you,
brother-in-law, but don't hold that against me.
Barry Blumenthal, I see your son once in a while over here in San Diego.
Yeah, he told me, and he told me,
Lots of
I'm
love
sorry to
to
hear
all you
about
guys.
that. I'm sorry
Lots
to
of
hear
love
about that.
to all you guys.
Thanks very
And
much.
girls.
Richard.
Yeah, and girls.
Yes.
I knew
See you all next
Bye,
week.
Derek.
Please, everybody, keep on
See you
joining.
soon.
Somebody
See you soon, Derek.
somebody
and
called my name.
Okay, yep, good.
Bye, Barry.
Derek, send me your email address.
didn't you have a brother Peter?
Yes.
Thank
Peter lives in Israel.
Okay.
We
All right.
married.
Your father was a magnificent individual.
Yeah,
He
we
was
know
really
that.
a leader in Habonim. He brought discipline to Habonim, a scouting ability. He had a wonderful voice. He used to sing at campfires every night with a beautiful bass, booming voice. And he really was somebody that everybody admired and tried to emulate was Sandpiper. And his brother,
Richard, you've forgotten about your sister Jean. Richard, you've forgotten about your sister Jean. What about you?
Bertie boasted that he went to a bar mitzvah every single Saturday of his life for Habonim.
Yeah, his brother used to participate as well. I think his brother was an architect.
Yeah, Milton was his name.
Milton, right, yes.
But he was actually a genius because he learned Japanese in the Second World War, and he was a translator for the Allied from Japanese to English. And as an architect, he wasn't that successful. He tried to kill me one day, literally.
He was very British.
We're going to have Brian.
Yeah, his son lives in New Zealand. I don't know if he's still alive or not. But Baylor, I think, asked where Jean is. My sister Jean lives in San Francisco. Yes,
we sometimes make contact.
Say again?
We sometimes make contact, email when she comes to Israel.
Yeah, she's still, she
She
married.
was in my class at school, a junior school, of course.
She has a companion called Isabel Scherer.
That's right, yes.
And Isabel and them live a very calm life in San Francisco. They have a beautiful home on the Pacific Ocean. And she spends her time walking in the redwoods, gardening, and doing, as I often say to her, she's a psychologist. I often say to her, how many brains are you going to screw up today? But that's
Yeah, no, but that's at 8:30.
A lot of people have exited.
If any of you want their email addresses, just email me to richardstern@bell.net and I'll send you their emails.
Harry.
Okay, bye.
Yeah.
Press leave.
Where are you?
Okay.
Who is that? Merle.
Merle. Where's Merle? Merle.
But there's no picture, Merle.
Where's
No, Merle's very shy.
I don't know how to work it. You know, the doll that you dumped when you were 12. That's me.
I'd like to know, is Jackie Rosenberg the Jackie that was Rosenberg Pharmacy?
No, Jackie Rosenberg is Mervyn. It's her computer. It's my wife.
Oh, I see. Okay.
What's your connection to Jean?
She's my
brother.
Brother.
Jean, myself, Barry Blumenthal, Merle, and Batia Sherman. We were all in the same class together.
And Faye.
And Faye.
And Faye.
And Naomi.
There's a lot
And
more.
David.
I'm trying to see who else is in. That's
David
we
Ashford.
matriculated 1961.
And Sammy.
Sammy and Merle were twins, are twins.
We were a great
Barry,
class.
I can't hear what you're saying.
Can you hear me?
Yes, no, I can.
I said Sammy was much older than Merle.
Much younger.
No, they were twins.
I know.
Sammy says, yes, Sammy says he's much younger.
But he was in my mother's stomach for 4 years. Extra.
It's
much younger than you.
And we were at school. We were all together
from 3 years
from
old.
kindergarten. We are friends for 73, 74 years.
They've taken everything.
74 years, man.
Is that? Yeah. And our parents were friends before that.
I know.
You lie, Mervyn. If I'm 77, you're also 77.
I'm 77, but my brother's 73.
We were at Miss Lopesh's junior school in Wherry Road.
Richard, can you hear me? Richard?
Yes.
It's Cecile. Do you remember me? Cecile Shurkin.
Yes, of course I remember.
Cecile from Balmoral Hotel.
Yes, yeah. I'm about the oldest person here that knows everybody. I'm about the oldest one living here that knows Jackie Aaron and you and Leonard.
Cecile,
Yeah.
I'm older than you.
Who's
Ruth,
talking?
I'm older than
Ruth Reifler's talking.
Oh,
Ruth Reifler.
Ruth, yeah. Oh, Ruth and I, we know each other very well. Yeah, but I was born here. Yeah, I was born here. Where the years have gone to, I don't know.
And just to add, sorry to say this, Cecile, but no, I don't want to make you black. Cecile still is very active in the synagogue and is the secretary of the synagogue. Just to add that.
Well done. Yeah. But it's wonderful. I mean, to see Jackie Aaron. I mean, Jackie was my sister's contemporary. He must be about 92 now. Yeah, he's quite old. Yeah. But he's everything. Yeah.
Well, can I
What
say
I want
one
to say?
Yeah, Jackie. I mean, sorry, Mervyn, and then I'll end off because it's going to end in 3 minutes.
Okay.
Go for it.
Harry Myers, Michael. Harry Myers just passed away. He was 101.
Yeah. Wonderful man.
And I want to tell you something, that at the first Memories of Muizenberg, a man stood up and said, I'm the oldest living member of Muizenberg. And a woman stood up next to him, and this is 10 years ago. Her name was Walpy, and she's still alive. She's now 112 at Highlands House.
Wow.
She's David Walpy's mother.
Yeah, she's my relation. Yeah.
I grew up in Muizenberg.
Yeah.
Got a photo and everything of her.
Yeah.
Incredible. So
what I
on that
want to
note-
say,
Yeah,
Rabbi, is that Muizenberg, and I get very emotional, but it's my whole life. It's my whole life. And it was unbelievable.
It's crying.
So Mervyn, I have to close just because it's going to stop again, and we'll leave some for next week. But I want to say two things. Number one is whether you're in your 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, or 90s, or even hundreds that you just mentioned, someone's 112. I need you all to remain alive, because in 3 years' time is 2.5 years' time is the century of the synagogue, and you all have to come and visit the century of the synagogue in 2020. So that's Rabbi's directions. You need to be alive. Okay, that's first point. Second point is you mentioned the oldest person in Muizenberg is still 12. I would argue that the youngest Jewish person in Muizenberg is my son. He's just turned 2 years old. So there's a whole and God bless us all with good lives and happy lives and long lives. Thank you all for being here. Look forward to next week to the speakers who are going